as you can tell by the title and probably the thumbnail, this was the story I have been talking about in the past few vlogs. This is mine and Harley's story. I wanted to do this kind of like awareness video to let a lot of women know about a pregnancy condition called preeclampsia, because I am sure there are a lot of women out there who don't know about it, and I was one of them. So preeclampsia is a medical condition that you get when you are pregnant, or in the rare cases after you have given birth, as the placenta will leave a few traces behind in your body. The symptoms for preeclampsia are high blood pressure, protein in the urine, severe headaches, swollen feet, hands, legs, your face, just really anywhere. And also like blurry vision, like the flashing lights that you see. So they're the symptoms, and a lot of people mistake them for just normal pregnancy symptoms, so they confuse them. And as I said before, I was one of them. So for most people, their dreams are to find a career and have that career, you know, to travel the world, to find their soulmate, to get married, to build a house or to build houses, or I don't know, find Bigfoot. My dream when I was younger was to be a mum, to have a family, and I almost lost that opportunity. So I don't even know where to begin. We were talking about when we'd start to, you know, make a family. And then 2016, we got more serious about it. We discussed everything you can about starting a family, you know, the pros, the cons, and just all that stuff. And we just felt that we were ready. So within a month, I was pregnant. My family, my parents, they knew that we were trying. And on the 19th of October, I took my first pregnancy test, which was literally like a week before my period was due, and I was pregnant. And then the next day, I took another one. And the day after that, which was my birthday, I took the third one. And they were all positive tests, like it was clear as anything. So I told Sam the first time I took the test and it was positive. And then I rang my mum and she was asleep. So then I rang my stepdad and he knew instantly what it was about. And when we were pregnant, further on, we kind of kept it as a secret because we were really scared to tell people who, oh, I wouldn't say weren't ready, but we didn't want to tell people who weren't going to be happy about it. So we kept it a secret for a while and then thought, it's our life, it's our baby, this is real. So, you know, Sam picked up his balls and I grew some lady balls, and then we told those people, and safe to say they were not happy about it. But, well, they got used to the idea and things became real. We ended up moving towns for Sam's work. He moved into this house. We already picked the baby's room, and literally by 20 weeks, we had his cot, we had the change table, bottles, clothes, a bathtub. Like, we had everything ready for our son. Before I was 20 weeks pregnant, my blood pressure started to rise a little bit. And I'm gonna put this out here right now. A normal blood pressure range is around 120 over 80. Just remember that. My blood pressure started to rise, and when they first started taking it a little bit serious, it was at 150 over 90. That was like a red flag. So they wanted to get me on medication, but they wanted me to see someone. Anyway, my symptoms came in around 19 weeks and I started noticing it more about 20 weeks. So when I was around 20 weeks pregnant, I remember walking in the shops, pushing the trolley, and my feet were sore, and I was with Sam and someone else. And I remember looking down and I pulled my foot out of my shoe and there was like a print, like my feet were so swollen. The fluid was like pushed up and it was really noticeable. And I remember this person that was with us just saying, you know, it's normal, you know, you're pregnant, this is normal. So she brushed it off and then I brushed it off. I was like, okay, it's normal then. And then I didn't want to make a deal or have people think I was complaining when I was pregnant. So every time I got a headache or something, everyone would just tell me that it's normal. And it came to the point where it sounded like I was just whinging, that I was just making a big deal out of it. So every time I had a headache, every time my feet hurt, every time I was swollen, I tried not to mention it. And that's what kind of really pisses me off. So when we got to the 20-week scan, we found out we were having a boy. And growing up, I always knew I was going to have a boy or have boys. At least that's what I thought. So I wasn't disappointed, but I was expecting it. So I wasn't really like that excited when I found out. But then we settled down and sat in the car. The first person I told was my brother. I messaged him and said, "You have a nephew, we're having a boy." And he started messaging me all these really weird names, and that's when it sunk in that Sam and I have a son, and it turned everything around. And immediately I wanted to go to the shops and buy boy clothes, so we did that. And a few weeks later, my blood pressure started to rise at the hospital, and then everything happened from then on. My feet started to swell. I remember I had friends come over and I was sitting on a chair, just leaning on it, and we were laughing about like how bad my feet were. And she was like, you poor thing. Like, she swelled, but never that bad. And again, we thought it was normal. And then when I moved my leg off the chair, I had this massive dent in my leg from all the fluid that had built up in my legs, and it was like disgusting how squishy my legs were. My hands started to get really, really swollen. I couldn't fit my rings on anymore, and I didn't even notice, but my face was swelling as well, and the headaches that I got were unbearable. My head would feel like it was going to explode, and I could feel it straight down my neck, like just throbbing. And I feel like if you sat your hand on the side of my neck, you would have felt everything in there just pulsing. Before my friends left, I started to shake, and she was like, "Honey, are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think I'm fine. I think I'm just cold," because I was like shivering. And then when they left, I went to jump in the shower to try and calm myself down, to get the swelling to go. And when I hopped out, I put my legs up on the wall and was like trying to just let everything run back, and and then my head started going again. But this time I started to cry because I couldn't handle it. I felt like my head was going to explode, and I called Sam to come in the room, and I said, "My head is so bad." Like, I was crying, and I couldn't get my feet to go down, and my shower just didn't make me feel any better. And he was like, "Do you want to go to the hospital?" And obviously, because I've been having like all these problems, I didn't want to make it a big deal. So I was like, I didn't want to sound like I was whinging. So I was like, "No, I think I should be fine. I don't know." So he was like, "Look, I'm going to call the midwives and we'll see what they say." And they told us to come in. And the first thing they did was give me a cupped peen to check if there was protein in my urine, and then I took my blood pressure. My blood pressure went up to 165 on 105, and then after that they were like, "You have to stay, we need to run more tests." And they told me there was protein in my urine, and I had no idea what that meant. So they told us to stay, and they were like, "Look, we need to run more tests, so we need to get blood from you to see how your liver and your kidneys are going." And they were gonna admit me. And obviously I can't say anything about it, so I was like, okay, sure. And that is when shit got real. I had this doctor come in to take blood, and he's like, you have really deep veins, and he couldn't get the needle to go into my vein because my vein kept collapsing. So he went and got a nurse, and then the nurse tried, and she couldn't get blood. My vein collapsed again. And they're like, "Look, we're going to call the anaesthetist to come in." So I think it was around 12 a.m. This dude came in, and he was like so grumpy because we obviously woke him up, and my body started to shake again. And I remember he was getting angry at me because he couldn't get the freaking needle in, and he was like, "Could you please stop shaking?" And I remember laying there like, I'm not doing this deliberately. It started to get serious. Like, he called someone to get the ultrasound machine because they had to put a cannula in because apparently I was getting really sick, that they had to give me something to stop my shaking. So they wanted to put a cannula in instead of using the butterfly needle just to take blood. But they still did have to take blood. Anyway, instead of trying to take my blood, he tried to put a cannula in to give me stuff to stop my shaking. And he had the ultrasound machine, and he was just watching my veins collapse. And in the machine, he was like apologizing, but he was fiddling with my veins. Like, he was poking them and moving the needle around and poking and just trying to get the needle in, and he couldn't. And he's like, "I'm so sorry, like, we're gonna have to try on your other arm." And at that point I was like, good, because like this arm has just had it. So then he came over to this arm, and he was trying and trying, and again, same thing, poking and playing my veins, and he couldn't get it to go. He couldn't get it to pop in. That sounds really gross. He couldn't get it to attach, and then he was getting really frustrated, and I think I was just in so much pain at that time, and my shaking, like my body just started convulsing really bad. And I remember looking down and seeing the bit that they use for the ultrasound, pushing on blood. Like there was so much blood running down my arm. There was so much blood. Like the sheets that were under my arm were no longer white. They were just covered in blood. And he was just trying to find my veins, and it was just one hot mess. So then I had like the head doctor come in and say I was really, really sick, that they had to transfer me to a bigger hospital. So they're going to get the paramedics to come and transfer me down to Canberra, which is an hour away. And the paramedics came in and they were like, you can't leave until we get a cannula in. So what they did was put a baby cannula and they got it straight in my hand. So that was good and enough to get me to go. And they took my blood pressure right before we left. And just in case you forgot what I said, what the normal blood pressure is, I'll say it again. The normal blood pressure range is around 120 over 80, and my blood pressure skyrocketed to 210 over, I think it was 170. I remember seeing the nurse there and just hearing Sam behind me in shock, like they couldn't believe that my blood pressure was that high. And I had to have this nurse sit with me in the back of the ambulance when they put me in. And I remember speaking to the paramedics, asking if they were going to put the lights on. They were so friendly, and he was like, we can if you want to. And Sam had to go home and take care of the pups and, you know, just get stuff ready, and he'd meet us in Canberra. And it did not take us an hour to get there. We got there so much faster. And I remember the minute the doors opened from the ambulance, I started shaking again, and one of the paramedics was like, you were right, are you cold? I was like, no. And they wheeled me in through the emergency department and brought me straight to the antenatal, I believe it was, or the birthing unit. The birthing ward, I can't remember. And I remember one of the paramedics was saying good luck to me and he'll be thinking of me. And by this point I was like, you know, like what the hell is going on? Like I didn't even feel that sick. And when I got into the hospital, I had my phone, I called Sam, and one of the nurses was saying that I had to have a catheter put in. The other nurse was going through my books and she was saying like, okay, so we need to get blood, blah blah blah. And Sam heard that on the phone and he started going off his head because he just saw me in a lot of pain, having people try to take blood from me. And he actually scared one of the nurses, and the nurses was like, if he's gonna be like that, he can't come in here. But I was like, no, Sam's never angry, he's just like scared because we've never been through anything like this and he's never seen me in pain like that. And it kind of is a blur from there, but I started to have seizures and I started to have like all these doctors and nurses were just flooding in the room. I didn't even remember Sam arriving. I could not see Sam. I could not see past the bed because there were just so much people surrounded around me. I had nurses at my feet trying to take blood, like putting needles between my toes. I had nurses on my hand, on my legs, like putting needles between my fingers, on my hand, my wrist, my legs even. They were just poking me everywhere trying to get blood. And I kind of remember seeing this man at my face, and he was just like, you know, you're gonna be okay. And I remember saying like, you're not touching my neck. And I knew that they wanted to get blood from my neck, but I was like, you're not touching my neck. And I remember looking over and seeing this massive needle get placed beside me. And I was like, what is that? And they're like, it's an adrenaline needle because you were so close to having a stroke. And I was like, what? Like, I had no idea what was going on. And I don't really remember the rest. I just remember being poked everywhere. My obstetrician from this day still has no idea how she got blood, but she did. She managed to get it through my tattoo, and she was bending my arm and there were like little droplets coming like into the tube, and she just kept bending and like fiddling with my arm trying to get all this blood to come in. And they have no idea how they did it, but they did it. So she got that sent away to go run tests, and she was like, look, we need to get a cannula in. And I think I just started crying. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be poked anymore. And she was saying that the little one I had in my hand was not good enough. It wouldn't last more than a day or so or something, I don't know. And I was 24 weeks and like 4 days, I think, pregnant with our son. And we had an ultrasound, and I remember the dates. I remember them saying that he's small, that he wasn't getting what he needed, and that he wasn't growing. And then I remember her saying that I'd have to give birth to him if I didn't stop shaking. I remember trying to sit as still as I could, and I was like, I'm not shaking anymore, like I'm fine. And she was telling me that it was the magnesium that was doing it, that I'm really close to having a stroke. She said that she wanted to play it out to see how we go. And every 15 minutes for the next 5 hours, I had someone in there taking my blood pressure. Like literally every 15 minutes. There had to be someone watching me for 24 hours just to make sure that I didn't roll over and have a heart attack. And after everything kind of cooled down, my parents came in, and I remember when Sam rang my parents to say that I was in the hospital, he was fine. And then I remember when he rang his family to say I was in the hospital, he couldn't speak and he just broke down. The next day, they wanted to put a Picc line in, and a Picc line is really not fun. They had to give me an anesthetic to numb the area, so they had to use another ultrasound. They wanted to put this in because they could then take blood and also inject magnesium or, you know, hydrate me or whatever. So what a Picc line is I actually still have the scar. You probably can't, no, you won't be able to see this little dot here. So what a Picc line is these 2 wires, and they feed it straight into your vein, and it goes straight up your arm and straight towards your heart. And when he was putting it in, he was telling me that I had to like put my head on my shoulder so it wouldn't go up my neck because I could hear it flush apparently. So it went up and around, and I had these 2 cords hanging out where they would take blood, you know, flush them and give me what I needed. Eventually we got to move rooms and go to the antenatal ward out of the birthing ward, which we felt so relieved. Our doctor, I don't know if you've seen the series House, but she was like House, like she had her like medical team behind her. She'd, every time she'd come in the room, tell us something, there'd be a whole bunch of people and she'd be like, I want you to go do this, I want you to go do that. And then, you know, she called the shots, and she came in and she was like, she didn't think I'd make it to 30 weeks, but they're gonna try. But he was so underweight. And so once we got to move rooms, that's when I had heaps of tests done. But Sam and I would ring our family and friends and let them know that, like, you know, we're okay, we're gonna make it to 30 weeks, we're gonna be fine. And I had to go out and have ultrasounds on my kidneys, on my liver. I had to have an ultrasound on my heart. I had to have x-rays around my chest. And yeah, and then I had like, I can't remember what it's called, an ECG, where they put those sticker things all over you to see how your heart is. I had to have so many blood tests done. I didn't have to pee in a cup, thank God, but I had a catheter so they could just take my wee from there and then test it for the protein. I had to have my blood pressure done from every 15 minutes. It went to every 4 hours, thank God. So I had to have my obs done every 4 hours. And it got to the point where every nurse that would come in, like if it was like a new midwife, I would tell her what they do and they would do it. And it was pretty cool. I remember I had someone learning how to flush my Picc line, and I had to teach her how to do it because I've seen it happen so many times, and it was her first time, and I thought that was pretty fun. I had to have those compression socks on, and then they had to put these stupid things that vibrate around your legs to like get your blood flowing and regulating, because I was not allowed to walk. Sam had to push me around in a wheelchair. So one night I remember waking up and I couldn't breathe, and I hit the button and called the doctors in, and you know, they were like, your obs aren't for another blah blah blah, is everything okay? And I was like, I can't breathe. And I was like, I don't know if it's my asthma, because like I've had asthma but I haven't had it for a while. And they were like, oh, let's just see if it's your asthma, you know, we can get you an inhaler. And I remember taking a puff and I was like, I think I'm okay, but I still could not breathe. And then the next day I was set to go get an x-ray done, and I remember this dude who put me in a wheelchair, he was like Speedy Gonzalez, he was like flying. Sam was saying he was struggling to keep up. Anyway, they gave me this shield to put around my belly to protect the baby from the radiation. So that was like around 11 o'clock in the morning. Throughout the day, Sam and I were joking around about this dude pushing me in the wheelchair, and you know, we were trying to laugh about everything. And then my doctor came in, and she said that she didn't have good news. She said that I had to give birth to my son because my life was in danger, more so than it was the night I came in. And she told me that they did an x-ray and they found clouds on my lungs. She told me that I had to give birth the next day, and she said the reason I couldn't breathe was because I was drowning. So all that fluid that I had in my hands and in my legs and in my feet and my face, I had nowhere to go but my lungs. So I started to drown, and that's why I couldn't breathe. And she said, that's the end game. There's nothing we can do. And then they started to tell us about his survival rate, and they asked me how I wanted to give birth. And at the time, before they asked me how I wanted to give birth, I remember Sam saying that he didn't feel well. and he looked awful, and he ran to the toilet and he was just throwing up just from all the stress. And I remember saying that I just want to have a C-section, I don't want to be awake, I don't want to feel any more pain. And they told me that our son was so small that if I had a C-section, they have to cut a different way, and if they did that, I would not be able to support another pregnancy, because if I were to get pregnant in the future, it would stretch the scar and the scar would just tear. So I had no choice but to give birth naturally. That was my only option. My camera just died. So after they said I was drowning, I thought I was going to be brought to like the birth suite, but instead it was a lot more serious than I thought. And I ended up being in the ICU, and I couldn't believe that I was placed in that ward.